On a chilly February morning in 2002, a long figure stood before a burnt corpse on a hospital gurney. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and charred flesh. The face of the body was unrecognizable, blackened and battered beyond identity. As a mother gently placed her palm against the body's hand, her intuition cut through the horror. The hand's shape and size, not much larger than her own, told her what she dreaded most. This was her son, Nitish. 2 nights earlier, he had vanished from a wedding. Now, in the soft dawn light, Neelam realized her life had been irreversibly halved into before and after. The boy she had raised and loved was gone in the most brutal way imaginable. This is the story of that one February morning, that one boy, and that one mother's fight for justice. This is the story of Nitish Katara. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Ashwarya.
And I'm Aryan.
And the case that we have for you today is one of the most horrific cases of injustice and honor to come out of India. So Aryan, have you ever heard about this case before? It's got a lot of very prominent people involved.
No, never heard of it.
So I got a DM a couple of weeks ago from someone saying, I can't believe that you guys haven't covered the Nitish Katara case. And it was like a light bulb moment in my mind where I knew of the case before and I knew sparse details, and it's astronomically important to a whole generation of Indians, but somehow it's kind of missed the radar for us.
I think for people listening and watching this podcast, we really take your recommendations seriously.
Yeah.
And if you want us to cover a case, of course, you can DM us at Desi Crime, but comment down in this video any cases that we have missed covering that might be either famous cases we've missed or even low-key cases from your area that you want us to dive deep into, and we'll cover them. Meanwhile, we also have something special for Diwali and the month of October for you, which is early access for free. Think of it like our Diwali gift to you. For the month of October, you can listen to the Desi Crime Podcast 2 days before anybody else can, only on Amazon Music, which is free with your Prime membership. So go to Amazon Music, look for Desi Crime, and you'll find it there. Also, if you're happening to be on Amazon and enjoying the Diwali sale, you can buy the Desi Crime book. But enough about us, on with the case for today.
Before we start the case for today, I want to thank the most significant source for this episode, a Hindustan Times article by Namita Bhandare titled Unshakable, Neelam Katara's Fight for Justice, which proved an invaluable insight into this story. February 16th, 2002, a Saturday night in Ghaziabad on the outskirts of Delhi. Laughter and music echoed from the brightly lit hall of the Diamond Palace banquet venue, where guests, friends, and family had gathered to celebrate a wedding. The banquet lawn was adorned with marigold garlands and strings of fairy lights. Amidst the swirl of colourful saris and sherwanis, 24-year-old Nitish Katara and 23-year-old Bharti Yadav moved together, exchanging shy smiles, there to celebrate their friend's upcoming marriage. Nitish and Bharti had been classmates in business school, and for the past 4 years, they had been deeply in love, though they kept it mostly hidden because their romance was anything but simple. Bharti was not just any girl. She was the daughter of D.P. Yadav, a wealthy and notoriously powerful politician from Uttar Pradesh. Her family commanded influence and fear in equal measure. Her father, often described as a Don-turned-politician, had a long shadow of criminal allegations behind him. From the start, his trajectory was tangled with both party loyalties and underworld rumors. D.P. Yadav began his electoral journey under the Janata Dal, later dipping into the Janata Party, allied with Mulayam Singh Yadav, and even spent time in the Bahujan Samaj Party. At one point, he joined the Bharatiya Janata Party, a move that was so controversial that the party reportedly pushed him out within a day. In 2007, he founded his own regional outfit, the Rashtriya Parivartan Dal, through which he contested and held seats in the Uttar Pradesh Legislative Assembly. But his political career was always shadowed by criminal allegations. DP Yadav's name appears in 9 murder cases, 3 attempted murder cases, 2 dacoity armed robbery cases, along with charges of kidnapping for extortion, violations under the Excise Act, the Gangsters Act, and even invocation of terror statutes.
For our non-UP listeners, UP being Uttar Pradesh, that's a clarification for non-Indian listeners. It's a state where those are the general qualifications of a politician. So while this sounds particularly harrowing,
Right.
the likelihood that other politicians have as many, if not more, criminal charges against them is usually a sign that they will get elected into power, which is an unfortunate reality of the state that Ash and I kind of belong to. So just to put that, don't think like this is a major deviation from what's the norm.
In fact, in one instance, liquor supplied via his network was blamed for the deaths of 350 people. In 1992, the CBI even charged him with the murder of Mahendra Singh Bhati, a local MLA and his former political associate. DP Yadav was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in 2015. Yet, in November 2021, the Uttarakhand High Court overturned that conviction, citing lack of evidence, and acquitted him. What made him notorious was not just the magnitude of the accusations, but how deeply intertwined they were with his political persona. He was, in many accounts, a man who leveraged muscle, money, caste networks, and fear to dominate local power circuits in western UP. Into this charged world was born Bharti Yadav, one of his 2 daughters. But making her world even more complicated were her 2 brothers, Vikas Yadav and Kunal Singh Yadav, of whom Vikas was also present at the wedding that February evening, along with Bharti's cousin, Vishal Yadav, both of whom kept a watchful eye on her all evening. Everyone knew the Yadavs did not approve of Bharti's closeness with Nitish. Nitish came from a different world. Born on 28 April 1978 to Neelam and Nitish Katara, his family was an educated middle-class household. His father was a Class 1 Gazette officer in the Indian Railways and his mother was a senior education officer with the Kendriya Vidyalaya school system. Nitish himself went on to study at modern school Barakhamba Road, one of Delhi's most premier schools, where he was remembered as bright and outgoing. For his undergraduate degree, he studied economics at Sri Venkateshwara College of Delhi University and then went on to earn a postgraduate MBA from the Institute of Management Technology in Ghaziabad in 2000. It was here, at IMT, that Nitish met Bharti Yadav. This is where the two had fallen madly in love. By 2001, they were exchanging letters, spending days on end together, and openly courting despite potential disapproval from Bharti's conservative relatives. A birthday card Bharti wrote to Nitish in April 2001 gives us one of the very few remaining glimpses into their relationship. Quote, "Chimpu, it's easy to love you. You listen to me without judging. You're so easy to talk to, so easy to feel close to, so easy to love. Happy birthday." End quote. Nitish too was crazy about Bharti. According to Neelam, he would shower Bharti with huge bouquets of flowers. Quote, "I would joke that his entire salary would go in pleasing the woman of his dreams, and he would shyly shrug it off." End quote. It was clear to his family that Nitish's feelings for Bharti were serious and slowly headed towards a marriage proposal. In fact, in November 2001, just a few months before the night we began this episode with, Nitish confided in his mother that he intended to marry Bharti and build a life with her. By this point, having completed his MBA, Nitish had accepted a position as an assistant manager for marketing with Reliance General Insurance in New Delhi, and by early 2002, he was doing well for himself. In the words of his mother Neelam, "We were a happy and content family. We were all friends living under this one roof." End quote. And theirs was a home that did not see caste. Neelam remembers that Nitish himself was brought up to never make distinctions based on caste, considering such bases, quote, "purely of medieval times." But despite the educational qualifications of him and his family, his was a household without the wealth or the clan status the Yadavs would have wanted for Bharti. In the eyes of her family, this match was an insult to their honor and caste pride. By that evening, the evening of February 16, 2002 that we began this episode with, the couple was there celebrating not their wedding but a friend's wedding. That bold move hadn't been made yet. Inside the venue, oblivious to the storm brewing, Bharti and Nitish stole moments together. Perhaps they danced to a Bollywood love song under the neon lights, smiling and hopeful about their future. Nitish had his whole life ahead of him, and with Bharti by his side, he might have imagined a life where their love eventually won over her family's resistance. As the wedding festivities wound down close to midnight, guests trickled out with love on their minds. And that's exactly when everything began to go wrong. That is the moment that Nitish Katara vanished from a room full of people. In the initial chaos of farewell ceremonies, not everyone immediately realized Nitish was missing though. His friend Bharat Divakar, who had accompanied him to the event, searched for him for about an hour amid the disappearing crowd, but just couldn't find him. Assuming perhaps that Nitish had caught a ride home with someone else or was busy, Bharat eventually left. By the time Bharat arrived at the Katara home in Delhi in the middle of the night, it was around 3 am and he was alone and anxious. Neelam Katara opened the door to find her son's friend standing there without Nitish. When Bharat stammered that Nitish hadn't been with him for hours and he didn't know where he was, Neelam's heart sank. This was unlike her son. Quote, "He was very particular about informing me when he was getting late," she said later. Something was wrong, she just knew it. Something was terribly wrong. By now, Bharti too was frantically trying to locate Nitish. From the venue, she had started calling friends to ask if anyone knew where he was. When Neelam got a hold of Bharti on the phone, Bharti sounded worried and anxious. But in her conversation with Nitish's mother, she gave her a crucial clue. That she had seen her brother Vikas and cousin Vishal take Nitish away from the wedding. That was the last time she saw him. She urged Neelam to go to the police immediately and suggested, oddly, that, quote, "Maybe my brothers have taken Nitish to Punjab." Punjab, hundreds of kilometers away, was where one of the Yadavs had business interests. It was a vague, grasping suggestion. Perhaps Bharti didn't know what else to think. Or perhaps deep down, she feared exactly what they had done. Neelam's mind raced with panic and horrible possibilities no mother ever wants crossing her mind. With a trembling voice, she phoned the local police station in Ghaziabad to report that her son had gone missing from a wedding, likely abducted by the Yadav brothers.
Ashwara, do we know anything about the relationship of the Yadav brothers with Nitish up until this point in terms of how they interacted with each other? Did they get along at least on surface level? Because I can understand okay, behind the scenes there is this enmity of sorts that's brewing, but when you meet people that are, so to say, your enemies also, you get along. You're not
that's right.
mean
Some
to each
civil,
other.
cordial,
So it does Nitish share that with her brothers, where he's comfortable enough to go to some place if they say come with us? Is that voluntary aspect there?
From everything that I've heard, Aryan, up until this point, it's that the contact was so limited that even to Bharti, it's sort of hard to imagine what could this conversation have been about. Perhaps it could have been normal, perhaps not, but the relationship was kept so guarded with just it's being hushed about in whispered tones, that from everything I've read, I don't think there has been much contact at all. It's not like there have been open threats. It's not like there's been any cordial relationship either. It just seems like everything is so kept under the wraps so far that there hasn't been much opportunity, and Bharti's kind of tried to hide this equation. So by late that night, Neelam Katara has reported her son missing, but the initial response from the police in Ghaziabad was slow. It was unempathetic, a story we've heard countless times before in cases where powerful political families are involved. But despite whatever consolation the police tried to give Neelam about her son eventually coming home like all young kids do, she knew one thing for certain. As night turned into the early pale light of dawn on February 17th, there was still no sign of Nitish, and he would have never done that to her. There was also no sign of Vikas or Vishal Yadav or the Tata Safari SUV they had come to the wedding in. But that night, that SUV was spotted by someone. At approximately 12:30 am, as the SUV was speeding out of Ghaziabad, it approached the Hapur toll plaza on the highway. There, a witness crossed paths with fate. A man named Ajay Kumar was stranded by the roadside after his scooter broke down. Ajay later recounted that a Tata Safari pulled up and the driver, whom he would later identify as Vikas Yadav, angrily told him to get his scooter out of the way. By the glow of the streetlights, Ajay saw the occupants of the car. Vikas at the wheel, a fair-complexioned young man in a red kurta sitting beside him, which is what Nitish wore the night of the wedding, and two other men in the back whom Ajay would identify as Vishal Yadav and a stocky man named Sukhdev Pahalwan. That fleeting glimpse was the last time anyone outside that car saw Nitish alive, and Ajay Kumar would go on to become one of this case's most significant witnesses.
The one difference between witnesses in India and witnesses abroad is how easy it is to sometimes influence sometimes manipulate,
Right.
or sometimes straight up threaten witnesses. And we've covered countless cases where the witness became hostile, which is they went back on the testimony they initially afforded to the court because it's not worth it. Like Ajay, and I don't know what happens in this particular case, but for all the Ajays of the world, is it worth their family's safety, their financial well-being, to bring justice to a dead stranger? Because the police, it's very difficult if you're a middle class or poor person to be a safe witness. Perhaps not the most sound decision. So for those witnesses that don't turn hostile, and I hope Ajay is one of them, hats off. But they're sort of the unsung heroes of the Indian judiciary.
This case sees more hostile witnesses than it does not.
Oh my God.
And it's a repeating story, whether it's the Jessica Lal case, whether it's this one. It's the same tale repeating over and over again of cases within the subcontinent. Something interesting I want to point out to our listeners about Ajay is that his last name in reports online is also Katara, but then other reports say it's Kumar. He has no relation to Nitish Katara at all. I don't know where this happened, that his last name became Katara in reports online. If that's actually his last name and that's just a huge coincidence and the Kumar reportings are wrong, I don't know. But that's just something to keep in mind. He's given extensive sort of writings and his interviews online on what he saw that night. Back at home in New Delhi, Neelam Katara probably paced back and forth, waiting for the sun to rise so she could rush over and file a missing persons report to begin a hunt for her son. Little did she know that Sunday morning, as the sun rose over sugarcane fields and dusty villages in western Uttar Pradesh, a police patrol driving near the Khurja Bulandshahr highway saw a terrifying sight. Not far from the road lay the charred remains of a young man's body. The corpse was burnt so badly that the face had been reduced to nothing. The heat of the fire and the brutality of the beating before it were evident to everyone who stopped to look. In fact, one early report noted that the victim's abdomen had been split open from the violence he had suffered. Villagers gathered, eyes wide in horror and curiosity. Who was this? What had happened here? By the time Neelam Katara reached the Ghaziabad Kavinagar police station that morning to formally file a missing persons report, she was oscillating between hope and unimaginable fear. Hope that maybe, somehow, her son was just lost or hiding. Fear because a mother senses when the worst has happened. At around 11 a.m. on February 17th, she filed an FIR with the police, naming Vikas and Vishal Yadav as the suspects based on what Bharti had told her hours earlier. The police, likely realizing the gravity of accusing a high-profile politician's son and nephew, finally began an active investigation. Within hours, an alert went out for the Yadav brothers, but surprise, surprise, they too, like Nitish, were still nowhere to be found. Not long after, though, the news no mother ever wants to hear came through. Police informed Neelam that a burnt body had been discovered roughly 80 kilometers away, across the state border in Uttar Pradesh. They needed her to help identify it, if she could. Neelam's world began collapsing at that moment, but maybe there was still some ounce of hope. Maybe it was someone else. When, accompanied by her relatives and friends, she travelled to see the corpse and entered the small, dimly lit mortuary, it was virtually unrecognizable. But then, within seconds, Neelam noticed something amidst the blackened remains. On what was left of the wrist, there was a wristwatch, a distinctive watch she knew belonged to Nitish. In fact, she recalled Bharti had gifted that very watch to Nitish a few months prior as a token of their plans to eventually end up spending their lives together. That was clue number one. Clue number two was far more personal and heartbreaking. Upon noticing the wristwatch, Neelam touched the body's left hand and recognition hit her like lightning. Its form, the way it felt in her hand, matched her son's. Quote, "When I placed my palm on his hand, I knew it was my son," she later said. The hand was only slightly bigger than hers, just as Nitish's had been. In that single moment, any remaining hope shattered, and Neelam Katara became, in her own words, a mother in darkness and despair. The coming days would test her in ways few can imagine, but in that moment, faced with unspeakable loss, she made a silent promise that would guide her for years. She would get justice for her baby boy. As the investigation swung into full gear, the case rapidly became front-page news. The brutality of the murder and the prominence of the Yadav family made it a national sensation. Here was a story of forbidden love ending in bloodshed, an apparent honor killing. At the center of it, a soft-spoken schoolteacher mother pitted against one of the most influential political dynasties in the region. Public sentiment swirled with outrage and sympathy. "No mother should face a situation like mine," Neelam told reporters, trying to capture the agony of her battle. Quickly succumbing to growing pressure, police at the crime scene recovered whatever evidence they could. The body itself was key evidence, of course. It was sent for forensic examination. Famed forensic expert Dr. T.D. Dogra at AIIMS in New Delhi took on the task of conclusively identifying the remains. Using blood samples from Neelam and her husband for DNA comparison, Dr. Dogra's team confirmed what Neelam already knew. The body was Nitish's. With the victim identified and the initial statements from Neelam and Bharti in hand, Ghaziabad police also promptly issued arrest warrants for Vikas and Vishal Yadav. Now, while that's fantastic and frankly a little unheard of, executing those warrants was another matter altogether. The Yadav brothers had vanished into thin air. DP Yadav, when contacted by Neelam on the morning of the 17th, claimed he had not the slightest idea where his son and nephew went. Whether he truly didn't know or was already working behind the scenes, we can only speculate. What we do know is that the Yadav family began pulling every lever to protect themselves. In the days immediately following the murder, something curious happened with Bharti as well. Initially, in the heat of the moment, she had cooperated, speaking to Neelam, urging her to involve the police, even giving a statement, albeit informally, to a woman police officer about her love for Nitish. But that atmosphere shifted quickly, making her the first witness to turn her back on Nitish. Within 2 weeks, a meeting was arranged at DP Yadav's residence in Delhi involving the Ghaziabad police officers and the Yadavs. By the time Bharti made an official statement that day, on March 2, 2002, her tone had dramatically changed. Now, she followed in her family's footsteps to say one thing over and over again like a broken record. Nitish was just a classmate with, quote, nothing special between them. Gone was any mention of love or plans to marry. And then, just as quickly, Bharti Yadav disappeared from the scene. Under the pretext of continuing her studies, she was whisked out of India, sent to the UK by her family shortly after Nitish's death. One day she was in Delhi, in mourning and in confusion. The next, she was reportedly in London, pursuing a course in hospitality and even working as a part-time nurse. It became painfully clear that the Yadavs were determined to keep the one person who knew the whole truth, the young woman whose intimacy with Nitish had spurred the killing, as far away from the trial as possible. Meanwhile, a nationwide hunt was on for the Yadav brothers, and after a few days on the run, the web closed in. Acting on intelligence, police teams traced Vikas and Vishal to a town called Dabra in Madhya Pradesh, hundreds of kilometers away. Roughly 3 weeks after the murder, they were caught and brought into custody. A seeming ray of hope in what otherwise looks like a deeply complicated and biased case. With the prime suspects finally in handcuffs, the case should have been open and shut. After all, the circumstantial evidence was compelling. Multiple people had seen the brothers take Nitish from the wedding. The body was found not far from an area familiar to the Yadavs, and the brutality spoke volumes about motive, a blatant honor killing. But this case was anything but straightforward. Under interrogation, Vikas and Vishal Yadav at first reportedly confessed. In fact, Inspector Ashok Bhadoria, who arrested them, noted in his initial report that the Yadav cousins had voluntarily admitted to kidnapping Nitish from the party. Another policeman at the station, Constable Brijmohan Mishra, later testified that he heard the accused plainly say, quote, they had murdered Nitish Katara after kidnapping him, end quote. An audio-taped confession was also obtained where the Yadavs described in chilling detail how they took Nitish for a drive, killed him, and burnt his body. They described how Vikas and Vishal Yadav approached Nitish and spoke to him quietly in hushed tones inside the banquet hall. Observers confirmed this and then recalled that Vikas and Vishal led Nitish out of the banquet hall and towards the parking lot. Perhaps Nitish himself wasn't alarmed at first. These were his girlfriend's brothers after all. Maybe he thought they just wanted to talk, and so he went with them, stepping into the large Tata Safari that the Yadavs had arrived in. The SUV's doors slammed and the vehicle roared out into the darkness. The clock struck midnight and then crept into the early morning minutes of February 17, 2002, a new day that would never dawn for Nitish. The cool night air rushed past as Vikas drove with Vishal and another accomplice in the back, keeping Nitish in place in the front passenger seat, all described in the confession to the police. It's scary to imagine what might have been said in the car. Did Nitish realize he was in danger? Did he plead with them or insist that Bharti loved him and meant no disrespect? Perhaps there was angry shouting about family reputation and honor. In the confession to police, Vikas admitted that in their eyes, quote, the affair was damaging to our family's reputation. At that moment, the three men in the SUV had one thing on their mind: to erase the shame they believed Nitish had brought upon them. Sometime during the next few hours, on a quiet stretch of road near a village in Bulandshahr district, the SUV pulled over. Under the cover of darkness, far from the city and without any help, Vikas, Vishal, and Sukhdev dragged Nitish out of the car. What followed was an act of unspeakable brutality. Armed with a blunt hammer, the assailants smashed it repeatedly into Nitish's skull. One blow, then another. His skull fractured, blood spilled onto the roadside dirt. As Nitish lay motionless, they decided to destroy any trace of his identity. They doused his body with diesel fuel and set it on fire, watching the flames consume the evidence of their crime. In the dark of the night, three men stood around a burning body, having committed murder and forever taking away a life. This tape, this audio recorded confession, eventually found its way to the media. In May 2006, NDTV broadcast portions of it, shocking viewers across the nation with the killer's own words.
I killed Nitish Katara with a hammer, so says Vikas Yadav's confessional statement, recorded by the investigating officer in the case just days after the murder.
I hit Nitish's head with a hammer. He fainted. After a while, he was dead. We drove 1 kilometer and then they threw his body onto the road. Then we took the diesel from our car's tank, poured it on Nitish's body, and we set it on fire.
Yet, as damning as those confessions were, they hit a legal snag. Because the statements hadn't been recorded before a magistrate, they weren't admissible as evidence in court.
Fortunately, it's not admissible as evidence, as it wasn't recorded before a magistrate. The chilling account outlines in graphic detail exactly how the deed was done and Katara's body disposed of.
The law rightly guards against custodial confessions obtained under duress. And more crucially, by the time of the trial, Inspector Bhadoria changed his tune too, just like Bharti, and denied that any confession was made in his presence. It later emerged that Bhadoria was actually a business associate of DP Yadav, a fact raising serious questions about his handling of the case. With Bhadoria's changed statements, the official record now lacked any straightforward admission of guilt from the accused. Still though, physical evidence began to surface supporting the prosecution. Based on leads from the Yadav statements, even if unofficial, investigators managed to recover the hammer used in the crime from the crime scene area, and forensic tests went on to clearly link the hammer to the injuries. This find would later weigh heavily in court. Through March and April of 2002, the police built their case and filed a charge sheet outlining the horrific tale: how an MBA graduate was slaughtered for falling in love, how a powerful family orchestrated a cover-up, and how a mother was left to pick up the pieces.
There was a crack on the head. After that, the body had been burnt completely. Everything was charred. God forbid that any parent ever have to see a child like that.
But even with the brothers in jail awaiting trial, the road to justice was going to be long and treacherous. The influence of the Yadav name loomed over every aspect of the proceedings in Ghaziabad. Neelam Katara began to realize that securing a conviction here would be like walking through a minefield, every step full of threats and attempt at swerving the truth. And surely Neelam watched her worst fears come true as in the coming months, one by one, pillars of the prosecution's case began to shake. Key witnesses who had initially spoken up started falling silent, or worse, changing their stories. Of the 4 wedding guests who had first told police that they saw Nitish leave with Vikas and Vishal that night, 3 mysteriously retracted their statements before the court. One of them, Rohit Gaur, brother of the bride at the wedding, had been recorded saying he watched Vishal chat with Nitish and lead him out to Vikas's waiting vehicle. By September 2006, Rohit flatly denied ever having said any such thing. Quote, "It is incorrect to suggest that I informed the police," he claimed, going back on his earlier account. He even denied knowing of any romantic relationship between Nitish and Bharti. His abrupt amnesia echoed the exact language used by other hostile witnesses, as if they were all handed a script they were now reading from. It wasn't just civilian witnesses either. One police constable, Inderjeet, had initially reported seeing Vikas, Vishal and Sukhdev together with a young man in the Tata Safari that fateful night, which strongly corroborated the witness Ajay Kumar's story. But come trial, Inderjeet too recanted, stating it was, quote, wrong to suggest, that same language, it was wrong to suggest that he ever saw the accused with the victim in any vehicle. But such synchronized backtracking didn't go unnoticed to the country. It was clear these witnesses were being intimidated or bought off. With each setback in court, it became increasingly evident that if justice was to prevail, it would require an extraordinary fight. And leading that fight was Nitish's mother, Neelam. This lively school teacher transformed into a warrior for her son. One judge would later remark in frustration and admiration that Neelam had been forced to, quote, move heaven and earth to get the key witness Bharti to court. And it's true, Neelam's battle was not just against the accused, but against an entire system inclined to shield the powerful. One of Neelam's first big moves was to get the venue of the trial changed. With witnesses falling off the trial roster left and right in Ghaziabad, a city where the Yadavs held sway, she feared that a fair trial was impossible. Her fears were well-founded. The Yadavs' clout in Uttar Pradesh was legendary and part of local lore. And so eventually, after relentless petitions by Neelam, the Supreme Court of India ordered that the trial be shifted out of Uttar Pradesh and moved to Delhi. This was a significant victory. It acknowledged that the considerable influence wielded by D.P. Yadav could taint the process in Ghaziabad. Delhi at least offered a neutral ground and a hope that witnesses might speak without as much fear of their lives. Meanwhile, the mystery of Bharti Yadav's absence loomed over the case. By 2003, as month after month passed, Bharti was the lone key witness who had never been examined in court. Everyone knew her testimony was crucial. She could establish the motive, the love relationship, and her family's opposition, and confirmed the last sighting of Nitish with her brothers. But despite nearly 40 court summons and warrants issued over 4 years, Bharti remained in London, evading each attempt to bring her back. The excuses kept coming. She was allegedly ill, had important exams, or had even fallen and couldn't travel. It was a farce that tested the patience of the court and of Neelam's family. Lawyers representing Bharti, paid for by her family, filed appeal after appeal to not call her altogether. At one point, the Uttar Pradesh public prosecutor even moved to officially drop Bharti as a witness, claiming her testimony wasn't needed.
How ridiculous is that?
How absurd.
So, I mean, this is clearly like there is something under the table happening here for them to come up with a claim, because no legal logic would dictate that to be the correct way of going about dropping one of the most important not just witnesses, but somebody who's embroiled in the case themselves.
Not just one of the most important, I think the star
the
witness.
most, yeah.
There is no rhyme or reason. This is all a complete farce. Neelam, like Aryan, was outraged. She fought that maneuver with every ounce of strength, knowing it was a ploy to weaken the case. A Delhi prosecutor supporting Neelam pointed out that letting Bharti off the hook, quote, showed malified intention and clearly demonstrated collusion with the accused's family. The judiciary eventually lost its patience. By late 2005, the court had had enough of this cat and mouse game. They ruled that Bharti was a material witness and must be produced to testify. But when, in 2006, with Bharti still a no-show, the Delhi High Court took the remarkable step of ordering her passport be revoked. She was, for all practical purposes, labelled an absconder, flouting the court's authority. With her UK visa due to expire and no legal travel documents, the walls were closing in on Bharti. If she didn't return, she risked being deported or even arrested abroad. Facing the prospects of being declared a proclaimed offender, Bharti finally relented. In November 2006, nearly 5 years after Nitish's death, she flew back to India to testify. The prodigal witness had returned, but under heavy conditions. The court, sensitive to the media circus around her, allowed her deposition to be on camera, meaning behind closed doors, away from press and public. Nonetheless, both families, the Yadavs and the Kataras, were permitted to be present in the courtroom as she spoke. Just imagine that room, Neelam on one side, determined, D.P. Yadav on the other side, imposing, and in the witness stand, their daughter and would-be daughter-in-law, finally compelled to break her silence. But Bharti's testimony, when it came, was a study in contradiction.
The reports which are coming in the media of there being an involvement with you and Nitish, is it true?
I said we were friends.
Okay. But were you anyway romantically involved?
No.
No? So there was no plan of marriage between you and Nitish Katara?
No. Never.
On one hand, she towed the family line to an extent. She denied any romantic relationship with Nitish, insisting they were, quote, just friends. She also denied writing any incriminating emails in response to emails that had surfaced where someone using her account had hinted at her father's role in ordering the murder. Bharti claimed those weren't sent by her. But on the other hand, Bharti could not entirely rewrite history. Confronted with the physical evidence of her relationship, the birthday cards, the love letters, and the gifts she had given Nitish, she conceded that yes, she had sent those. And yes, there was, quote, something special between them. It was an admission, however reluctant, that backed up the motive the world could see right in front of their eyes. Her brothers killed Nitish because he and Bharti were in love and possibly planning to marry. Crucially, Bharti also confirmed details of the fateful night. She acknowledged being at the wedding with Nitish. While she tried to minimize the depth of their relationship, she did corroborate that both her brothers were present at the venue, placing Vikas and Vishal squarely in the scene. Interestingly, prosecutors chose not to directly ask her if she saw her brothers taking Nitish that night. Perhaps they knew she would deny it and turn hostile, nullifying any value from her appearance at all. Instead, they kept her testimony focused on establishing motive and presence, both of which she couldn't escape.
Aishwarya, that is such a smart way of going about a case or sort of being the prosecutor, which is, yes, there is a question you can ask that is sort of the nail in the coffin question, but the upside is not worth it because getting it wrong and the likelihood is that she would deny it has worse consequences for everything else she can offer. So that's such a smart way of going about this.
Absolutely. So you let her not sort of ruin what she can. You take what you can get from her, the most that she can admit to, and you kind of run with that as your best case scenario.
That's really cool.
After 2 days on the stand, the runaway witness was done. When she walked out of the courthouse, media cameras swarmed to catch a glimpse. Bharti was hustled into a black Scorpio, flanked by Yadav loyalists who even roughed up photographers in their effort to shield her. Just like that, she vanished from public view again, but this time she had at least fulfilled her duty to the court. With Bharti's evidence now on record, the prosecution's case was significantly stronger than it had been at the beginning of trial. In fact, prosecutors publicly expressed gratitude to her, claiming her testimony, quote, helped the case reach a logical conclusion, end quote. Even so, the Yadavs didn't cease their attempts to derail justice. Perhaps the scariest episode of witness intimidation came in mid-2007. By that point, one brave soul still stood firm. Ajay Kumar, the passerby at the toll plaza. Despite approaching the police to say he felt threatened and even being assigned police bodyguards for protection, Ajay came under attack. In July 2007, two men he called his acquaintances lured him to a temple. There, they offered him a plate of chaat, and moments after eating it, Ajay became violently ill, vomiting and writhing from stomach cramps. He managed to get to a hospital in time where doctors confirmed it was likely food poisoning. But given the context, it was widely suspected that this was an attempt to poison the key witness into silence. Ajay survived and reported the incident, and shockingly, an FIR was lodged against DP Yadav himself and 4 others for allegedly plotting the poisoning. It spoke volumes that the reach of this case extended to such extremes. A witness allegedly targeted in broad daylight in the heart of Ghaziabad. The quote Don DP Yadav flatly denied involvement, of course, but by now the pattern was evident. Any obstacle to the Yadav's well-being was being met with either cajoling, coercion, or straight-up violence. Through all of this, Neelam Katara still remained unflinching. She attended every hearing, often clutching a photo of Nitish and quietly praying. The media dubbed her indomitable and courageous, marveling at how a single woman stood toe-to-toe with an entire power structure. For Neelam, it was simply what a mother had to do. In interviews, she credited an inner resilience. Even spiritually, someone watching over her, she said once, giving her the strength to overcome despair. Her younger son Nitin also stepped up, testifying about the panicked calls with Bharti after Nitish disappeared and confirming how deeply in love Nitish and Bharti truly were. It became the story of a family fighting for justice against another family fighting to evade it. At long last, after years of twists and turns, the trial neared its end. The evidence, painstakingly gathered and protected, spoke clearly. The forensic proof, the recovered murder weapon, the telephone records of frantic calls, Bharti's grudging admission of closeness, and the very fact of the charred body, all of it converged into one conclusion. And the judges, unpressed now by the small town cloud of the Yadavs, could see it plainly. In late May of 2008, the verdict was delivered. The court found Vikas Yadav and Vishal Yadav guilty of kidnapping and murdering Nitish Katara. As the pronouncement was made, Neelam closed her eyes. A 5-year-long breath finally exhaled. The trial court judge did not mince words in condemning the crime. He agreed with what the press and public had long suspected. This killing was an honor crime, born of an outdated, brutal mentality that could not tolerate a daughter's choice of partner. 2 days later, on May 30th, 2008, the court announced the sentence: life imprisonment for both Vikas and Vishal. For Neelam, that life sentence, typically at least 14 years in India, was a significant victory, though she felt it still fell short of the ultimate justice her son deserved. There was also another trial that concluded around this time. Sukhdev Pahalwan, the stoutly built hitman who had assisted the cousins and likely wielded the hammer that took Nitish's life, had absconded until 2005. Once caught, he was tried separately. In 2008, the same judge found Sukhdev guilty as well and handed him a life term too.
Delhi High Court has upheld the lower court order in Nitish Katara murder case. All three accused in this case, Vikas Yadav, Vishal Yadav and contract killer Sukhdev Pahalwan, who were awarded life imprisonment for kidnapping and murder of Nitish Katara, will have to serve the life sentence.
Dude, I'm loving this judge. For sort of being this harbinger of justice, and how they're carrying out their duties and the statements they're making. But more than that, 5 years for a case to wrap up with the trial court to announce the sentencing. And understand, this is not a low-level court. This is the Delhi High Court. 5 years is fast in Indian jurisprudence, for anybody wondering. Like, 5 years is like... I'm very positively delighted to see a 5-year turnaround on a sentencing of this magnitude with so many political elements involved. Because whenever there are political elements involved, we have seen cases stretch up to 15, 20 years with no sentence, with the decree being of a bailable offense, right? We saw this in Ruchika Girotra for once. So, shout out to this judge, whoever they were.
That's what Ruchika Girotra comes to mind of another case where there is someone powerful involved and an ordinary family fighting for justice. This case, for whatever reason, and so many people credit it to Neelam, has seen a completely different outcome, and it actually is so heartwarming to see. The trio of killers were now all convicted and facing the prospect of decades behind bars. The Yadav family's influence might have delayed justice, but it could not prevent it. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Neelam and Nitin for their reaction. Neelam's face, etched with equal measures of relief and sorrow, appeared on every news channel. She thanked the judiciary, her lawyers, and all those who supported her. Yet, her fight was not quite over. Almost immediately, Neelam vowed to continue pushing. She intended to appeal for a harsher punishment, even the death penalty, on the grounds that this murder was so heinous and calculated so as to fall in the rarest of rare category, deserving capital punishment. As a mother who had seen the gruesome remains of her child, nothing short of the ultimate punishment felt appropriate. On the other side, unsurprisingly, Vikas and Vishal filed appeals against their conviction too. And with that began the next phase of the saga, the high-profile appellate battles in higher courts. While those played out, another surprising angle emerged. Despite being convicted murderers, the Yadav cousins were frequently out of jail on bail in the ensuing years, raising serious questions about favoritism. In the first 2 years of incarceration, Vikas managed to get interim bail 66 times, sometimes for medical reasons, sometimes for reasons as trivial as personal matters, often with little explanation. There were reports and later court observations that during some of these excursions outside prison, Vikas went back to his old life, engaging in all kinds of illegal activities, including allegations of attempting to interfere in the Jessica Lal murder case while out on bail. Once he even vanished for a brief period, effectively absconding while on release. Each time, however, he was recaptured or returned to custody. These repeated releases and violations infuriated the public and the courts alike. It seemed the privilege of being a politician's son lingered even after conviction. One terribly ironic instance of his bending the law to his will was in late 2009, when Vikas Yadav petitioned for bail to attend none other than Bharti Yadav's wedding. She was getting married to a businessman in grand, if low-profile ceremonies in November that year. The courts granted him a few days' release to attend his sister's nuptials. The irony was thick. The brother who had murdered to stop one marriage now walked free to participate in another. Sources later described Bharti's wedding as a simple affair given the circumstances, with heavy scrutiny and the shadow of her brother's infamy looming over it. Still, life was clearly moving on for Bharti.
Aishwarya, going to jail, the fact that it's a punishment is because you don't get to participate in life. The punishment of a jail isn't that you're demoted to a bad room, I mean, sure, that's part of it, but the essence is that for your crimes against society, you are missing out on participating in all those things that society gets to otherwise because you're a Samaritan. For you to get bail to attend weddings, brother, you get bail from prison, like temporary bail, for 5 days to a week to go to the hospital if need be, to attend to other cases that you need to attend a funeral, which is also kind of understandable. But a wedding? No. That's just, this is clearly a privileged prisoner. This is not something all prisoners are afforded.
No, 66 bails granted in a 2-year time span, was it? Is abjectly absurd. You're not going to the hospital 66 times a year. No one's dying in your family 66 times a year. You don't have other cases against you.
You know what? 66 times a year means more than once a week.
Oh, holy crap.
66 times a year means more than once a week. That's anyway the amount of weekends you have. Like, that's most 9 to 5 people, people in 9 to 5 jobs, if one is to say 9 to 5 jobs are prison, are free only on the weekend. So, like, I don't get how this is different. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is, and again, this is, as much as I've praised, certain elements of the judiciary here for upholding justice and whatnot, this exploitation of the system is something we see so often by those who have political clout. Because what's the point of a prison sentence if you're not in the prison for half your sentence?
There is none. Absolutely none. In the years that followed, the case worked its way through the courts. In April 2014, the court delivered another crucial verdict. Despite the appeals from the three killers, it upheld the convictions of Vikas, Vishal and Sukhdev. More than that, the court recognized the egregious nature of the crime. The judges labelled the murder an honor killing, noting it was executed in a, quote, carefully planned and premeditative manner, driven by, quote, extreme vengeance. This strong language was a direct slap at the mindset that had fueled the murder. Although honor killings are not a separate offence under Indian law, the court's acknowledgement of the motive carried symbolic weight. Given the brutality and the attempts to destroy evidence by burning the body, the court took another extraordinary step. It enhanced the punishment beyond a normal life term.
अभी हमने कहा था डेथ पेनल्टी के लिए जो नहीं हुई है, मगर ये बात तो कम से कम केस ने मानी है कि सिंपल लाइफ इम्प्रिजनमेंट काफ़ी नहीं था, तो सज़ा एनहांस की गई है. तो वहाँ तक हमारी बात कोर्ट ने रखी है कि सज़ा को बढ़ाया है और कोई रेमिशन 30 साल तक के लिए नहीं दिया है. वहाँ तक हम संतुष्ट हैं. अब इसके आगे हमें डेथ पेनल्टी के लिए फिर से जाना है सुप्रीम कोर्ट में.
The court sentenced Vikas and Vishal to 25 years of rigorous imprisonment without remission for the murder and added on an additional 5 years for the destruction of evidence to be served consecutively. In effect, they were to spend 30 years in prison, much longer than a typical life term where convicts walk out free after 14 years. The court explicitly said that a mere life term would be grossly inadequate in this case. Neelam's persistence had clearly influenced the outcome. This was the judiciary's way of ensuring the punishment fit the crime even without granting her plea for a death sentence. As for Sukhdev, the contract killer, his sentence was set at 20 years, giving him a somewhat lesser role. The Yadav brothers, of course, appealed again, this time to the Supreme Court of India. And in October 2016, the final chapter of the legal battle came to a close. The Supreme Court delivered its judgment, and it was a partial relief for the convicts. The apex court upheld the convictions since there was no doubt about their guilt, but it made a small concession on the sentences. The court agreed that 25 years without remission was appropriate for the murder itself, acknowledging the High Court's stance. However, it overruled the consecutive sentencing. Instead of stacking on the additional 5 years on top, the Supreme Court ordered that the sentences run concurrently. In practical terms, this reduced their total imprisonment from 30 years to 25 years. The third man, Sukhdev, was still to serve a 20-year term. The Supreme Court reasoned that while the crime was heinous, it fell just short of the rarest of rare threshold that would warrant the death penalty or an entire life behind bars without any scope for release.
हाँ, ये सजा अगर 10 साल पहले हुई होती तो शायद और इससे और स्ट्रिंजेंट हुई होती, क्योंकि मेरी मांग डेथ के लिए थी. डेथ नहीं तो कम से कम ऑल ऑफ लाइफ विदाउट रिमिशन के लिए थी. और अगर वो हो गया होता तो सेंटेंस और क्लियर जाता. मगर ठीक है, लड़ाई लड़ेंगे, अभी तक लड़ी है और लड़ेंगे.
And so the Yadav cousins would not hang, but they would be middle-aged men in their 50s by the time they tasted freedom again, if at all. Neelam Katara, upon hearing the Supreme Court's decision, had mixed feelings. She was grateful that the court maintained a tough sentence. 25 years was still a stiff sentence by Indian standards for murder. But the reduction from 30 to 25 years and the denial of the death penalty was disappointing to her. In a public statement through an open letter around that time, Neelam wrote that while she respected the court's verdict, she would file a review petition because in her eyes, quote, life imprisonment should mean life, end quote. To her, the semantics of years mattered less than the principle. She never wanted these killers to walk free in society. The Supreme Court yet again did not entertain what she asked for, and Neelam went on to find closure in the final judgment of 2016. It had been a 14-year-long battle from the night of the murder to the final Supreme Court ruling. 14 years of trials, media scrutiny, repeated reliving of trauma for Neelam and her family. But Nitish's killers were definitively punished, and the case became a landmark in many ways. It highlighted the ugly reality of honor killings in modern urban India, a practice people like to pretend only happened in rural backwaters, not among wealthy, educated families. It exposed how the rich and powerful abuse the system, but also how they can be brought to justice with perseverance. And it led to concrete changes. For instance, Delhi High Court in 2003, prompted by threats to witnesses like in this case, laid down witness protection guidelines for the first time in India, a step towards shielding those brave enough to testify against powerful accused. In the aftermath, Bharti Yadav remained largely out of the public's eye. She started a new life while bearing the knowledge that her brothers had committed a terrible crime for her honor. The psychological burden of that is anyone's guess. D.P. Yadav, the patriarch, saw his political career tarnished irreversibly by the scandal. He himself eventually faced jail time in an older case, the 1992 Bhati case, a conviction in 2014 that for a time put him behind bars, though he was later acquitted on appeal in 2021. The Yadav's aura of invincibility had cracked. Even in their ancestral village of Sarfabad, people quietly welcomed the justice served to the Yadavs. Quote, no one is above law. If they have committed a crime, they should face consequences, said one local resident, noting that this case had been an eye-opener for the community. The Yadav family, once given god-like treatment in the village, now saw their influence wave. Observers later remarked that the sheer money and muscle power D.P. Yadav expended in fighting the Katara case ended up fast-tracking the collapse of his own empire. In trying to preserve his family's honor, he instead brought it to ruin. As for Neelam Katara, she slowly transitioned from a distraught mother to a symbol of legal tenacity. Over the years, she became an advocate for victims' rights and even served as a voice in debates on honor killings and witness protection. But she never stopped being first and foremost Nitish's mother. For her, every court hearing, every petition, every interview was a way to keep her son's memory alive and to ensure his death was not in vain. As we reach the end of this tragic tale, our hearts go out to Nitish. He was more than just an honor-killing statistic. He was more than just a beacon of justice for others. He was once a young boy whose younger brother Nitin still remembers bathing with him. Nitin still remembers going on long drives with him, where they would, quote, discuss anything and everything. He was a friend, remembered even today in his circles as someone with an infectious and honest smile. That honest smile had girls falling all over him, his mother would later recall. He was a son, remembered as idealistic, morally upright, and compassionate. A son who stepped up for his family as he saw his father's neurological illness worsen in 2001. He was a lover of Sufi ghazals, photography, and the outdoors, which he explored in his favorite blue Maruti Gypsy. At the heart of it, he was just a 23-year-old in love like you and I. His story serves as a sobering reminder that the battles against archaic notions of honor continue to be fought, even in modern India. But his story is also one of hope. Neelam Katara's victory, even if bittersweet, stands as a testament that even in the face of the most desperate odds, justice can prevail.
If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Karak Merch.
keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.